Bringing Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the former, with us now. And sir, good morning to you. Mike Pompeo joins us here. Trey Yinks brought us a report around 6 o'clock this morning saying that Hamas doesn't have control of all these remaining hostages. Let's say there are roughly 200 left over still in Gaza. And Islamic Jihad has maybe 40, upwards of 50. So how are we going to find our way out of this? And do you believe an extended truce is the right move now?
Well, good morning, Bill. It's great to be with you. Look, I've not tried to second-guess the Israeli decision-making process. It's got to be wrenching. The pure joy of seeing these families reunited is something we can all rejoice in. But make no mistake about it, whether it's the PIJ, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or just some rogue criminals that are continuing to hold Israelis, this challenge remains an operational and strategic one for the security of all Israeli people, not just those who've got loved ones that are in harm's way today. And so the Israeli leadership will have to make a series of just wrenching decisions about how to do this. But we shouldn't forget, while we're all focused on these crossings, the return of these hostages, this is precisely what the Ayatollah in Iran had hoped for. He had hoped precisely that our love of life, our decency, our humanity would prevent us from keeping our eye on the ball, which is protecting the citizens we're responsible for. And as these releases are taking place, there are attacks on Americans throughout the theater. You talked just a moment ago about a report from strikes from Hezbollah. What's happening in Gaza is just one element, one tactical region of a larger theater and a scope of the ring of fire that has been built out over years by Iran.
Speaking of that, Senator Tom Cotton was on the Sunday show, and he says there should be some massive retaliation. Watch here.
I would target Iranians who are operating in Iraq and in Syria. I would also send a clear message to Iran: if these attacks don't stop immediately, then we'll begin to threaten their assets. The way to stop these attacks is not to be fearful and hesitant and cautious in a response, but massive retaliation to make it clear we will not tolerate these attacks on Americans.
What do you think the conversations are like inside the administration on this?
You know, Dana, I hope they're precisely what Senator Cotton described. I fear that they are not. You know, he and I have been working on this Iran problem together since 2015, since the first inklings of the JCPOA. It's coming on a decade now. And what you can say over this entire decade is there's only one thing that Iran will respond to. If we're going to protect American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, if we're going to protect the American homeland from attacks by Hezbollah cells that are in South America or perhaps even here inside the United States, you can't just go after their proxies. The fact that there are Hamas fighters dying while the Iranians are sitting in Tehran laughing is exactly what the Ayatollah had hoped for. And so Senator Cotton's right. This will have to be cost-imposing on the regime itself. We know how to do it. The target list is long. The tool set that we have isn't just operational and open. It's clandestine and deep. We have lots of ways we can impose costs on them. But as long as we're simply talking about, gosh, are we going to have a pause or not a pause, I'm confident that Iran will continue to inflict its terror all around the world.
Yeah, you're right about that. That line you just gave there, the ring of fire, really encompasses the entire region here. Let's go back to January of 2020 when Soleimani was taken out, when he landed at that airport in Baghdad. Just play this out for us. If this administration had the guts to go ahead and go after some of this leadership, maybe it's these Hamas leaders living in Qatar, hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from the conflict in Gaza. Well, what would happen throughout the region? What would be your best guess as to how that would unfold?
Well, Bill, we don't have to guess. I'll describe what happened that day when we took the strike on General Soleimani. I remember it vividly. I was in the middle of it. The first thing that happened is we took someone off the battlefield who was orchestrating attacks on Americans and presenting risk to American life. So as a tactical and operational matter, we took out a bad guy and saved American lives. But your point is a larger one, which is that the whole world took note of this. Our friends in the region, the Iranians, the Qataris, the Emiratis, the Saudis, they took note. They said, gosh, these Americans are real. They're going to protect us. They're going to preserve decency. The Iranians took note. They had been, in the days leading up to that, they'd been attacking our embassy in Baghdad. That virtually stopped after the attack on Soleimani. And you should note, it not only mattered in the region, in the Middle East, but it mattered all around the world. They saw an administration that was prepared to deter adversaries and protect America. It had a deterrent effect all over, Bill. I hope this administration has the same level of seriousness in protecting America. I haven't seen it to date.
But, Mr. Secretary, we also haven't seen regional leaders condemning Hamas's actions.
No, I agree. That should happen. Not just regional leaders all across the world, including in New York City at the United Nations, where they have been absolutely abhorrent on this set of issues, describing what's taking place in Gaza as the worst thing that's happened in a long time. That's not remotely true. We need the whole world to understand the barbarity of what took place on October 7th and Israel's basic, most fundamental right, and in fact need, to protect and defend its own sovereignty. We need every leader to do that. It will take American leadership, Dana. When America's on the sidelines, when we're ambiguous, when we're talking, kind of wandering around talking about, gosh, I wish there'd be a longer pause, the whole world knows that we're actually putting pressure on Israel to stand down. And when that happens,
the last thing I'd point
those
out
leaders
is
begin to hedge.
In this Washington Post article over the weekend, there's a story about there's dissent within the White House and the Biden administration. There's a quote from a senior official of the Biden administration that said, "We're taking on a lot of water on Israel's behalf," which I think signals that they've got other considerations in mind at the moment. Maybe not at the top with
Dana,
President Biden, but we'll see.
You've seen it. Dana, you've seen this. You worked in a White House. That pressure from inside that White House will be enormous to demand Israel stand down.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mike Pompeo beginning a brand new week with
Thank you,
us
Bill.
today. Thank you, sir. We'll talk again very